This story is titled Family Said I Ruined Their Lives, So I Left. But a few days later, they begged me to reconcile. Before diving into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing some momentum, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and helps us continue creating great content. Your support truly means everything. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thank you so much, and now, let's get into the video. Hey Reddit, long-time lurker, first-time poster. This will be a lengthy one, so buckle up! TLDR at the bottom. I'm 24, female, and I grew up as the overlooked child in what I can only describe as a chaotic family dynamic. I was never the favorite. That title went to my sister, the golden child. She could literally spill something on the kitchen floor, and my parents would find a way to blame the dog or me. The thing is, my sister was painfully average at everything. She couldn't even write an essay without relying on SparkNotes. And yet, my parents treated her like she was a genius. Meanwhile, I was excelling academically. Not to brag, but I was that student who set the curve in every class, scored a perfect 2,400 on the SAT before they changed the scoring system, became a National Merit Scholar, and was the captain of the robotics team that competed at internationals. I was that nerdy girl who loved math and stayed up late coding for fun. But at home, there was complete silence. I remember one time, my sister got a participation trophy from her middle school art teacher, who was also her friend's mom, by the way. My parents took her out for a fancy dinner at a steakhouse downtown, let her order a $50 steak, and spent the entire night praising her creativity. That same week, I won the state math championship. What did I get? That's nice, honey. Hey, can you help your sister with her algebra homework? She's struggling again. It wasn't just a one-time thing either. It happened constantly. When I got accepted to a special summer coding camp at MIT, my dad literally grunted and asked, "But who's going to help your sister study for summer school?" My mom even had the audacity to suggest I turn down MIT so I wouldn't make my sister feel bad about herself. Seriously? My achievements were making her feel inferior, but that wasn't my problem. I went to MIT anyway, and that summer changed everything. I met people who valued being smart, found mentors who recognized my potential, and realized just how messed up my home life truly was. When I came back home, everything looked different. I started noticing patterns that had always been there. How my parents displayed my sister's C+ grade improvement on the fridge, while my straight A+ report cards got shoved in a drawer. They spent thousands on her dance lessons, which she quit after 3 months but couldn't afford a $300 programming course I wanted to take. What really pissed me off was that I was essentially my sister's unpaid tutor throughout high school. I'd write her papers, make study guides that were just answers with extra steps, and sometimes even take her online tests. My parents didn't even hide that they expected this from me. It was my job as the smart one to help the family. Here's the kicker. I had secretly been receiving recruitment emails from tech companies since junior year. Google, Microsoft, even a hedge fund reached out about their post-college pipeline programs. They saw my projects on GitHub and the algorithms I'd published. When I tried to show my parents the Microsoft email, my mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but your sister got invited to Heather's pool party this weekend." Isn't that exciting for her? A Fortune 500 company was trying to recruit me while I was still in high school, and all they cared about was my sister's social life. The worst part was that I kept trying. I worked hard, maintained a perfect GPA, kept quiet when they made their little jabs, never fought back, and thought maybe if I achieved enough, they'd finally see me. But nothing changed. One night during my junior year still haunts me. I found my mom crying in the kitchen. I thought something terrible had happened. When I asked what was wrong, she sobbed about how my sister hadn't been invited to the popular table at lunch. I stood there awkwardly, patting her back while she cried about my sister's lunch situation on the same day I found out I was valedictorian. I didn't even tell them. What was the point? My dad was no better. He'd spend hours watching my sister's terrible volleyball games, where she barely played, but never once came to any of my robotics competitions or coding tournaments. When I asked him why, he said, "That computer stuff is boring." No one wants to watch nerds type on keyboards. Yeah, except those nerds typing on keyboards now make more money than he ever will. That summer, after my MIT program, I started freelancing as a coder. I kept it secret from my family. Every dollar went into a private bank account they didn't know about. By senior year, I had nearly $7,000 saved up. I'd also started working on a security tool in my spare time, a side project that would eventually change everything. But I'll get to that later. Funny enough, my guidance counselor called a special meeting with my parents to tell them I had a shot at Ivy League schools. My mom's response was, "But what about her sister? Will this affect her college chances?" The counselor was so confused and said, "Well, based on your daughter's grades and activities, she's on track for community college, or maybe a state school with some scholarships." My parents looked devastated, like someone had just told them their dog had cancer. Meanwhile, I was sitting there thinking, what did you expect? She barely maintains a C average, and her only extracurricular is being a social media influencer with 230 followers. Everything came to a head the Thursday before graduation. I remember it perfectly because I had just received an unbelievable email about a six-figure software engineering internship after graduation. An offer that made me wonder if they accidentally added an extra zero to the salary. I was in my room reading the email for the fifth time, trying not to freak out, when I heard the screaming downstairs. My sister had received her final grades, and surprise, she had failed calculus for the third time. This meant her GPA had dropped below the minimum requirement for her safety school, and she might not get into college anywhere. Here's the kicker. I'd been doing her homework for years, writing papers, making study guides, and sometimes even taking her tests. I was like her academic life support. But for this last calculus exam, I had been swamped with my own finals and this huge security project that would eventually become my company. I'd offered to help her study the week before, but she blew me off to party with her friends. "It's fine. I've got this," she said, while painting her nails and watching TikTok. She didn't, in fact, have this. So there I was, reading about this life-changing job offer while World War III broke out in the living room. I tried to stay out of it, but eventually I had to go downstairs for food. Coding makes you hungry. Big mistake. The moment my sister saw me, she exploded. "This is your fault," she screamed, her face all blotchy. "You were supposed to help me. You knew I needed to pass." My dad jumped in. "We asked you for one thing to help your sister succeed." My mom, always ready to add salt to the wound, said, "We'd be better off without you. You've ruined her future." I stood there, hand still on the fridge door, completely stunned. Let me get this straight. I'd been working my butt off for perfect grades, side projects, and doing her homework for years, and somehow I'm the problem. Because I didn't spoon-feed her calculus answers this one time, that was it. Something inside me snapped. I didn't cry or scream, I just nodded and said, "You're right. You would be better off without me, and I'd be better off without all of you." The look on their faces was priceless. They expected me to apologize, to grovel, to promise I'd somehow fix my sister's grades. They didn't expect me to agree with them. I turned around, walked to my room, grabbed my emergency backpack, one I had been secretly preparing for months, and packed it. It had all my important documents, birth certificate, social security card, passport, already stored in a waterproof pouch. I grabbed my laptop, external hard drives, and the $6,542 I'd saved from freelance coding work. As I was packing, my sister stormed into my room. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Exactly what you all want. Leaving. Getting out of your life so I stop ruining it." "Don't be so dramatic," she rolled her eyes. "Just fix this. Call my teacher or something." The audacity. Fix this? How exactly am I supposed to fix your failed test? A time machine? Mind control? Blackmail? I laughed. "Yeah, I'm the smart one. Smart enough to know when I'm being used." I zipped up my backpack, brushed past her, and headed for the front door. My parents were in the hallway, watching with these strange expressions, like they were starting to realize they had miscalculated. "You're not really leaving," my mom said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, like she could control reality with her words. "I am," I said. "I've officially ruined my last day in your lives." I didn't even look at them as I walked toward the door. My dad asked, "But who's going to help your sister get into college?" I kid you not, that was his concern. I turned around one last time. Maybe try actually parenting her instead of expecting me to do it for you. And just like that, I walked out. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody called after me. Nobody texted to check if I was okay. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. It was eerily anticlimactic. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their love and approval, and when I finally gave up, there was nothing. No grand reaction, just silence. It was the final confirmation that I never truly mattered to them. I walked to the bus station and bought a ticket to the city. 3 hours later, I was checking into a cheap hotel near the tech district, using cash so it couldn't be traced. Not that they'd try to find me. They wouldn't. But better safe than sorry. That first night was surreal. The hotel room was small, and it smelled like cheap cleaning products, but it was quiet. No sister blasting music, no parents arguing about her future. Just peace. I ordered a pizza, opened my laptop, and accepted that job offer. Then I called Josh, one of my mentors from the MIT summer program. I'd kept in touch with him, and he'd been telling me for months that my home situation was toxic. He answered on the second ring. "It finally happened," I said. "I left." "Are you safe?" he asked immediately. It was the first time anyone had ever prioritized my safety. "Yeah, got a hotel, got money, got my documents. I'm good." He said, "Stay there tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out something more permanent." No questions about whether I was overreacting, no suggestions that I go back and make amends, just immediate acceptance and support. It was honestly mind-blowing. That night, lying on the lumpy hotel mattress, I felt this strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I was completely on my own at 18. No safety net, no family support, but also no toxicity. Freedom is terrifying when you've never had it before. I checked my phone too many times that first night, some small part of me hoping they'd call or text, that they'd realize what they'd done and beg me to come back. Nothing. Not a single message. By morning, that last little bit of hope had died, and in its place was something new. Determination. If they didn't want me, fine. I didn't need them either. I had my brain, my skills, and now, this job offer. I had plans to create something so remarkable, so successful, that one day they would realize what they'd lost the day Josh introduced me to Maria, a friend who needed a roommate. She had a tiny apartment in the city, and the only spare room was an even smaller walk-in closet. I'm not exaggerating. It was literally a closet with just enough space for a twin mattress squeezed in, leaving barely any room to lie down, with my clothes hanging right above my head. The rent was $400 a month, which was still a ridiculous price for a closet. But when you're on the brink of homelessness, you take what you can get. Here was my advantage, though. Most runaways don't have marketable skills and connections. That MIT summer program wasn't just about coding, it was about building relationships. I had stayed in touch with everyone, shared my projects, and asked for their feedback. So when I needed help, I had people to turn to. The job offer I had gotten was real, but it wouldn't begin for another 2 months. I needed money now, so I hustled, picking up freelance coding gigs, fixing websites, and debugging apps. Whatever would pay the bills. Was I qualified? Not really. Did I make it work? Absolutely. Nothing pushes you like the fear of living on the streets. I worked crazy hours. My office was either my closet or the local library, and I showered at the gym, the cheapest membership I could find just for access to the bathroom. My diet consisted mostly of ramen and energy drinks, but honestly, it was still better than living at home. No one was shouting at me, telling me I wasn't good enough. The freedom I had was worth every hardship. By the time my real job began, I had saved enough to move into a proper bedroom in a shared house. 5 roommates, 1 bathroom, but I had my own door. Living the dream. The job itself was fine, but after 2 months, I was bored out of my mind. I had bigger plans. Remember that side project I mentioned? The security tool I'd been working on before everything went sideways? I kept developing it in my spare time. It was a niche crypto security tool, but with massive potential. One Friday night, when most 18-year-olds were partying, I was at a tech meetup. That's where I met Vikram, a venture capitalist specializing in cybersecurity startups. We hit it off, and I showed him my project. Before I knew it, I had $250,000 in seed funding. Just like that, I was the owner of a company. I quit my job the same day. My manager was completely confused. "You're leaving to start a company at 19 with no degree?" Yep, that's exactly what I was doing. The next 2 years passed in a blur. My security platform took off. Turns out, exchanges really do need solid security. Every crypto hack that made the news brought more clients my way. Was it stressful? Of course. Did I work myself to the bone? Absolutely. But every milestone felt like a slap in the face to my family. By 23, I was running a company worth 8 figures with 30 employees and offices in 2 cities. I bought a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I drove a matte black Tesla, paid for in cash, partially because of the car, but mostly for the priceless look on the salesman's face when I handed over $80,000 like it was nothing. I casually dated other founders and tech people who understood the lifestyle, but nothing serious. After growing up with my family, I had the emotional availability of a brick wall. That's something I'm still working through in therapy. What surprised me the most about success was how quickly people forgot what you were. Suddenly, I was the businesswoman everyone admired. Tech blogs wrote articles calling me a prodigy reshaping cybersecurity, but no one remembered the scared teenager who once lived in a closet. My family? Radio silence. No birthday calls, no congratulations when my company made headlines, no holiday invitations. Fine by me. Their absence was the cleanest part of my new life. I did some casual social media stalking. My sister ended up at some obscure college with a holistic admissions process. Basically, her grades weren't good enough for anywhere reputable. My parents posted photos, all proud, at her orientation. Meanwhile, I was closing 8-figure deals, but whatever. Sometimes, late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd stand on my balcony looking at the city lights and think about the scared 18-year-old who walked out with nothing but a backpack and sheer willpower. They thought I'd fail. They expected me to crawl back, begging for forgiveness for leaving my role as my sister's academic crutch. Instead, I built an empire. All without them. Success is the sweetest revenge. Anyone who says otherwise is lying. One day, I was sitting in my pajamas when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but glanced over and saw missed calls. Mom 7, Dad 4, Sister 10. I literally dropped my coffee mug. After 5 years of complete silence, 5 years where they never tried to contact me, they were suddenly calling me nonstop. My first thought was that something had happened. Maybe a grandparent had passed away, but even then, why would they expect me to care? I let the calls go to voicemail, a mix of curiosity and a sick feeling in my stomach. 10 minutes later, the first voicemail came through from my sister. "Please call back. It's important. We need to talk." No. "How are you?" No. "Sorry, we were horrible." Just "we need." 3 more messages followed, each one more desperate than the last. I listened to them while pouring myself a cup of coffee. I felt strangely detached, like I was watching a movie about someone else's dysfunctional family. The next message was from Mom. "Sweetie, please call us back. It's urgent. We wouldn't bother you if it wasn't important." Then Dad, "We need to speak with you. Family emergency. Call ASAP." And my sister, "I know you hate us, but please, please call back. We're desperate." None of them mentioned what the emergency was because there wasn't one. No one was dying. No one was in the hospital. I had a pretty good guess about what it was, though. I decided to answer the next call, not because I cared, but because I was curious. I wanted them to know just how well I was doing without them. The phone rang again. It was Mom. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh, thank God," she sighed, like she'd just learned I was alive after a war. "We've been trying to reach you for hours." No, "How are you?" No, "It's been years." Just straight into drama. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. There was a pause, and then her voice cracked. "We're in trouble. Your sister. She's been trying so hard, but she can't find a job. She graduated, but no one will hire her." We've spent everything on our student loans, and now the bank is going to take the house. I almost laughed out loud. Of course, it was about money. What else could it be? After 5 years of silence, they were suddenly reaching out because they needed something. "And we need help," my mother whispered. "We know about your company. We saw you in that magazine. Please, just this once, we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate." I nearly choked on my drink. "So, you've been keeping tabs on me enough to know I'm successful, but not enough to reach out until you needed something?" "It's not like that," she weakly protested. "Then what is it like?" I pressed, enjoying her discomfort more than I should have. That's when my father grabbed the phone. "Listen, we made mistakes, but right now your sister needs help. She's brilliant, but she just needs a foot in the door. If you could just give her a job at your company," I interrupted him with a laugh. "A job at my company? The sister who couldn't pass calculus without me doing it for her? The one who's brilliant, yet can't find a job anywhere?" "She's changed," he insisted. "She's worked hard." "No," I replied simply. "I don't hire people who've coasted through life on the backs of others. My company values merit. Novel concept, I know. Please," my mother was back on the phone crying now. "We'll lose everything. We just need a loan." "Until what?" I interrupted. "Until you find another sucker to solve your problems? You told me you'd be better off without me, remember? So be better off without me." I hung up, my hand shaking slightly, not from anxiety or guilt, but from anger mixed with a strange satisfaction. They needed me now, after years of making me feel worthless. The irony was delicious. I blocked their numbers immediately, but they were relentless. Messages came from unknown numbers, emails flooded my inbox, and they even tried to contact me through my company's customer service portal. It was both pathetic and impressively desperate. A part of me wondered if I was being too harsh, if I was becoming just as toxic as they were by enjoying their desperation. Maybe, but another part of me, the part that remembered crying myself to sleep after they missed my science fair, the part that remembered being told I was ruining their lives, felt nothing but satisfaction. 3 days passed with constant attempts at contact. Then, just when I thought they'd given up, the security desk at my building called. "Miss, there's a family here saying they're related to you. They don't have an appointment, but they say it's an emergency." A chill ran down my spine. They had found out where I lived, tracked me down like stalkers. I briefly thought about calling the police, but decided to handle it myself. "Don't let them up," I instructed. "Tell them I'll come down." The security guard's voice dropped to a whisper. "The older woman is causing a scene in the lobby. She's saying she's your mother and has a right to see you." Drama was her specialty. "I'll be right down." I took my time getting ready, making them wait just as they'd made me wait countless times as a kid. I put on my most expensive outfit, a tailored suit worth more than my dad's monthly salary, and my diamond earrings, gifts to myself after our Series B funding closed. I wanted them to see exactly what they'd missed. Their daughter, the success story they tried to bury. As the elevator descended to the lobby, I felt strangely calm. The universe had come full circle. 5 years ago, they had thrown me away. Now, they were literally at my doorstep, begging for help. Karma had a way of introducing itself, and she was about to do so wearing Louboutin shoes and a $5,000 suit. When the elevator door opened, I saw them right away. They seemed smaller, diminished somehow. My father's shoulders were hunched, his hair completely gray. My mother had aged drastically, deep wrinkles etched around her mouth and eyes. And my sister, she'd gained weight. Her designer clothes, probably bought on credit, were straining at the seams. They all looked exhausted, desperate. Good. I walked toward them slowly, my heels clicking against the marble floor. My building had a lot of finance and tech people, so everyone recognized a power move when they saw one. And make no mistake, this was a power move. Recognition dawned on their faces as they saw me, followed by shock as they took in my appearance. I appeared different, self-assured, well-dressed, and accomplished. Not the frightened teenager they had driven away. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping a solid 10 feet between us. Body language 101. Maintain distance from potential threats. My mother rushed toward me, seemingly to hug me, but I stopped her. "No, please, honey, we just need to talk," she said. I firmly replied, "Step back. using the tone I reserved for time wasters during board meetings. She froze in place, a hurt expression crossing her face. My father wrapped his arm around her, always her protector, but never mine. "We wouldn't have come if it wasn't serious," he said in a rough voice. "We're about to lose everything. The bank gave us 30 days. Your sister can't find a job, and our retirement accounts are drained. We just need a loan to get back on our feet." I glanced at my sister, who was staring at the floor, as if it held the answers to the universe. No apology for years of treating me as their academic slave. No recognition that they were only here because they had something to gain. She blushed and muttered, "I'm sorry. I was awful to you." "I know that now." "No," I responded. "You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it's come back to bite you. There's a difference." I turned back to my parents. "Let me get this straight. You want me, the daughter you threw away, the one you said ruined your lives, to bail you out? To save the perfect daughter who couldn't succeed even with every advantage?" "We made mistakes," my mother whispered, tears forming in her eyes. A classic manipulation tactic. Terrible mistakes, but please, we're still family. The lobby had fallen silent. The security guards were observing, one with his hand on his radio, just in case things escalated. I noticed a few residents discreetly pulling out their phones. Wonderful. This would be lobby gossip for weeks. "You're not here because you miss me or because you're sorry," I continued, the coldness returning to my voice. "You're here because you need something. If I were struggling instead of thriving, you wouldn't have bothered looking for me." "That's not true," my father protested, but his gaze shifted away. A classic sign of lying. "Here's what's going to happen," I said coolly. "You're going to leave my building and never contact me again. Not by phone, not by email, not in person. If you do, I'll file for a restraining order. I have the resources to make your lives difficult if you push me." My sister finally looked up. "So you're just going to let us lose everything after all we did for you?" she asked. I laughed genuinely in disbelief. "All you did for me? Please enlighten me. What exactly did you do for me except take and take and take?" She had no response. I turned to leave, but then something made me twist the knife a little deeper. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "If you had ever once been proud of me, if you had acknowledged my successes instead of resenting them, I might have helped you. But you only saw me as useful when I was serving your needs. So now you can solve your own problems, just like I had to." I walked to the elevator, not looking back, even as my mother called my name. The security guards stepped forward, blocking their path as they tried to follow me. When the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of their faces. Shocked, devastated, broken. And I felt nothing, just a quiet satisfaction that karma had finally caught up with them. Back in my apartment, I poured another drink and sat on my balcony. I should have felt triumph, vindication, maybe even sadness, but all I felt was emptiness. Like I'd finally removed a tumor I'd been carrying for years. My phone buzzed with texts from my mother. "Please don't do this. We're desperate. We have nowhere else to turn. Your sister might have to drop out." I blocked the new number without responding. Then the emails started. "We're about to be evicted. Dad might have to declare bankruptcy. Please, just talk to us. Blocked, blocked." That night, I got a text from an unknown number. My sister this time. "They're taking the house next week. Mom's had a breakdown. Dad's talking about living in his car. Is this really what you want?" I typed back, "What I want is irrelevant. This is what you earned. Actions have consequences. This is yours." Then I blocked that number too. They had their chances, years of chances, to be decent parents, to be a decent sister. They chose differently. Now they were living with those choices. So, yeah, it's been 2 years since that confrontation in my building's lobby, and I still think about it sometimes, lying awake at night. Not with regret, but more like remembering the pain of pulling out a rotten tooth. It's painful, but necessary. The aftermath was as messy as you'd expect. That video of my mother being escorted from my office building made the rounds in certain tech circles. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that my PR team had to issue a bland statement about private family matters and request for privacy. Several investors called me personally, nervously avoiding the topic of my personal issues potentially affecting the company. Rich people hate drama unless they're the ones causing it. My family didn't go quietly for about 3 months. They were relentless. They tried contacting my employees via LinkedIn. One particularly desperate move was reaching out to my investors. One even called me about it, creating possibly the most awkward business call of my career. They sent physical letters to my apartment. They got distant relatives I barely knew to call me. They posted thinly veiled Facebook statuses about ungrateful children that mutual acquaintances screenshot and sent me. I handled it like any other security threat. Restraining orders, cease and desist letters from company lawyers, and increased security protocols. Eventually, they stopped. The silence came suddenly and completely, like a switch had been flipped. I found out through the grapevine. Okay, fine, I still check their social media occasionally, judge me, that they lost the house, my sister dropped out of college, and moved back in with my parents, who now rent a small apartment in a much less affluent neighborhood. My dad found a job at a call center. My mom posts a lot of everything happens for a reason inspirational quotes. My sister works retail. Meanwhile, my life continued its upward trajectory. 6 months after I severed ties with them for good, I finalized the sale of my company for 9 figures. Those acquisition offers I mentioned earlier. I took the best one. The day the deal closed, I bought a house in the mountains, another on a private beach, and set up a foundation to help underprivileged kids get into tech. The weirdest part? The money didn't make me happy. Don't get me wrong, financial security is incredible. And I'm thankful for it every day, but there's a void that money can't fill. My therapist says it's because I built my entire identity around proving my family wrong. And now that I've done that, what's left? So I've been working on finding purpose beyond revenge, building relationships that aren't transactional, and learning to trust people. It's hard work, harder than building a company, to be honest. Recently, I'm dating someone who knows my whole story and respects my boundaries. I'm mentoring young programmers who remind me of myself at 18. Brilliant, but overlooked. I'm working on new projects that excite me. I'm building a life defined by what I want, not by what I'm running from. For those of you dealing with toxic families, abusive parents, or the golden child dynamic, I don't have all the answers. Everyone's situation is different, but I'll say this, sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice. Sometimes success really is the best revenge. And sometimes the family you build yourself is worth far more than the one you were born into. Thanks for reading my story, Reddit. It's been real. Peace out, Reddit. Thanks for listening to my story. 2 thumbs up. I'm a 30-year-old man, and I recently married the love of my life. My wife and I had been planning our honeymoon for over a year. A dream trip to the Maldives, to a private, all-inclusive beach resort, just the 2 of us. Finally, unwinding after all the wedding stress. That was the plan, at least. But somehow my family decided that my honeymoon should turn into a family vacation, and when I refused, I was painted as the villain. It all started at a family dinner. My wife and I were at my parents' house, along with my younger brother, older sister, and a few extended relatives who tend to show up uninvited. Someone brought up our honeymoon, and I casually mentioned the Maldives. Big mistake. My mom immediately got excited and started talking about how beautiful the Maldives was and how she'd always wanted to go. My dad chimed in, saying it sounded like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Then the joke, that wasn't really a joke, happened. My mom, laughing, suggested how fun it would be if we all went together. My dad seriously added, "Why should only you 2 have all the fun?" My wife and I laughed it off, thinking they were just joking. But they weren't. A few days later, I was added to a massive family group chat. The first thing I saw was a message from my sister talking about flight prices. My cousin had already found great hotel deals, and my aunt was asking about resort packages. My entire family was planning a trip to the Maldives as if it had been their idea all along. I immediately shut it down, telling them this was our honeymoon just for my wife and me. They all responded with a chorus of, "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We won't bother you. We'll do our own thing." My mom sent a long message claiming it was just a coincidence that they all wanted to visit the Maldives at the same time. And my dad added the classic, "Family should come first." I didn't buy it, and neither did my wife. She was furious. She told me to make it clear that they weren't coming. I tried again, telling them outright that this wasn't happening. That's when my mom pulled the guilt card. "This will be the last big trip before we get too old. Why are you being so selfish?" My siblings piled on, calling me ungrateful and telling me to go with the flow. At this point, I was done arguing, but things only got worse. My cousin casually mentioned in the chat that he had booked his flights. Then my aunt said she did too. Somehow, my wife's sister got involved and booked a flight as well. This wasn't just my immediate family anymore. It was turning into a full-blown family reunion. In a panic, I called the resort. And sure enough, my family had booked rooms at the same resort we were staying at. My honeymoon had officially been hijacked. I begged them to cancel, but they refused. My mom acted like I was being unreasonable, saying, "We won't bother you. We'll do our own thing." But then, my brother let something slip. They had also booked the same excursions, including the couple's massage my wife and I had planned. That was it. That night, my wife and I made a decision. We were not going to let this happen. We secretly looked for other honeymoon destinations, found a new location, booked everything, and canceled our Maldives trip without telling anyone. When my family found out, all hell broke loose. My mom called, crying, saying I had ruined the family trip. My dad sent a long message accusing me of prioritizing my wife over my family. My siblings flooded my phone with messages calling me selfish. Extended relatives who weren't even involved started messaging me, saying I was overreacting. But the best part? They weren't mad that we chose another destination. They were mad that we'd canceled the original trip and wasted their money. They actually expected me to rebook the Maldives trip so they wouldn't lose their reservations. That wasn't happening. My wife and I boarded a plane, and for the first time since this nightmare began, we could finally relax. Of course, my family didn't take it well. They completely lost it, accusing me of excluding them from a trip that was never meant to include them in the first place. When I ignored them, they took to social media. The meltdown started as soon as they found out we had gone to Bora Bora instead of the Maldives. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First, my mom called, crying so hard she could barely speak, repeating that I had ruined their trip and how much effort they had put into planning it. Only she wasn't talking about my honeymoon. She was devastated about their vacation, as if I were personally responsible for their bad decisions. Then came the texts from my dad, a long, drawn-out speech about how family should always come first and how I had changed since I got married. He made sure to mention how much my mom was suffering because of my selfishness and how I was prioritizing my wife over my family. The group chat exploded next. My brother and sister bombarded me with messages, accusing me of being the villain for not going along with their plan. My brother said it wouldn't have been a big deal if we'd just gone to the Maldives with them. My sister accused me of overreacting and punishing everyone by changing the location. Meanwhile, my wife told me point blank to stop engaging with them. The honeymoon had been hijacked, and we weren't going to let them make us feel guilty for taking it back. But the drama didn't stop there. My aunt, who wasn't even invited, jumped in, calling me ungrateful for not appreciating how much my family loved me and wanted to be part of my life. Then my uncle got involved, saying I had embarrassed my parents by ditching the trip. Suddenly, it was all about family honor, as if I had disgraced them by going on my own honeymoon. The group chat continued to spiral. My brother dropped passive-aggressive memes about people who forget where they came from. My sister dramatically announced she was done with the drama, despite fueling it the whole time. My mom left the chat entirely, making sure to tell everyone how heartbroken she was. My dad stayed silent, probably hoping I'd apologize. At first, I ignored it, but then my cousin, the one who had somehow booked his own flight without my knowledge, leaked our new honeymoon location. I had no idea how he found out, but suddenly, everyone knew we were in Bora Bora. Instead of realizing how insane they looked, they doubled down. My parents demanded I rebook the original Maldives trip so they wouldn't lose money on the reservations, as if it were my responsibility to fix their mistake. I refused, of course. And that's when the silent treatment began. For days, no one texted me, no passive-aggressive group messages, no calls, nothing. It was like they had all disappeared. Then they changed tactics and started calling my wife instead. My mom tried the emotional manipulation route, telling her she was tearing the family apart and how she had changed me. Ironically, this was after my parents had started struggling with the cost of the trip, assuming we'd contribute financially. When that didn't happen, they started arguing about who would cover the extra expenses, as if my wife had brainwashed me into wanting a honeymoon without the entire family tagging along. My dad left a guilt trip voicemail, saying he hoped my wife was worth losing my entire family over. That's when things went from crazy to disturbing. I found out my brother had called the resort in Bora Bora, pretending to be me trying to get details about our reservation. The resort shut him down immediately, and I added extra security measures to prevent any more interference. If they tried anything else, I wouldn't hesitate to take legal action. Luckily, the resort didn't fall for it, but the fact that he even tried was enough. My wife and I decided we were done. We blocked several family members and refused to engage any further. At first, it felt like a relief, but then doubt started creeping in. Was I being too harsh? Could I have handled it differently? I knew setting boundaries was the right choice, but part of me wondered if things could have played out differently if they had just listened. Should I have let them come along to avoid all the drama? I vented about the entire situation on Reddit, mostly just to vent, but within hours, the post blew up. Thousands of people weighed in, all agreeing that my family had gone too far. Reading those comments was the reality check I needed. Then something unexpected happened. A cousin I barely talked to messaged me privately. They told me the family was still in chaos over the canceled trip, but also admitted that a lot of relatives actually agreed with me. They just didn't want to say it out loud. Apparently, my parents had been complaining to everyone about how I had betrayed them, but behind closed doors, some relatives thought they had taken things way too far. That's when I realized this wasn't just about the honeymoon, it was about control. My family wasn't mad that I had taken a trip. They were mad that I had said no to them, and they weren't going to let that go anytime soon. The insanity didn't end there. My mom took things to the next level with a Facebook rant, a long, dramatic post about selfish children who abandon their families the moment they get married. She made sure to throw in phrases like, "after everything we've done for him," and "some people forget where they come from." She didn't mention names, but it was clear who she was talking about. The comment section became a mess. Some of her friends agreeing with her, others asking if she was okay, and a few family members I barely spoke to jumping in, talking about how sad the situation was. Then the real division began. Some relatives unfollowed me, probably to stay in my mom's good books, but others started messaging me privately. A few cousins told me they secretly thought my parents had gone too far. One even admitted they were relieved someone had finally stood up to them. But my siblings weren't done yet. They started spreading rumors saying I was letting my wife control me. My brother told people that my wife had forced me to cancel the honeymoon and that I had changed since marrying her. My sister was telling a slightly different version, claiming I had gone against the family and that our parents were heartbroken. Apparently, she made sure extended family members knew her side of the story first. My dad made one last attempt, a single call, one final chance to fix everything. If I just apologized and agreed to come on the trip, all would be forgiven. The entire family was waiting for me. My dad said we could all just move forward if I made things right. I refused. Silence. Then, right before hanging up, my dad muttered, "You'll regret this someday." After that, they stopped trying to convince me, but not because they respected my decision. No, they had a much bigger problem. They were losing money. Since my wife and I weren't going, they were stuck with extra rooms at the resort. They scrambled to sell them, but the resort didn't allow name changes on bookings. They were stuck, out thousands of dollars, all because they refused to accept that our honeymoon wasn't meant to be a group vacation. That's when my mom made one last call, full of dramatic sighs and long pauses. She ended it with, "I just hope you're happy," and then hung up. I ignored it. My wife and I boarded our flight to Bora Bora. For a moment, it finally felt like it was over. But as soon as we landed, I checked my email and saw a message from my cousin. He mentioned, "Just a heads up, your parents are still trying to figure out where you're staying." Apparently, they've been asking around to find the exact resort. Not sure what their plan was, but it didn't matter anymore. We were done with them. We kept our location private and ignored any messages from family. However, my sister wasn't finished. A new post appeared on Facebook with a picture of her, my brother, my parents, and some extended family members in front of the resort in the Maldives. The caption read, "Having a great time in paradise with the real family." I couldn't help but laugh. It was so obvious they were trying to make it seem like they were the ones who had been excluded, not the other way around. My wife and I decided we were done with their drama. Days later, I received another text from my parents. "We miss you. Can we talk?" It was predictable. The moment their guilt trip didn't work, they switched to the Concerned Parent Act. I wasn't fooled. I knew if I responded, they'd just start pushing the same old narrative. That's when I made my final decision. It wasn't just about ignoring them for now, it was about taking a long-term break from them. They'd shown they would never respect my boundaries, and they saw my marriage as something to serve the family, not as my own life. Finally, my wife and I got to enjoy our honeymoon in peace. No texts, no calls, no drama. Just us, and that was the real victory. A week after returning from Bora Bora, I got a call from my mom. No crying, no yelling, just a cheerful voice as if nothing had happened. "So, how was your little honeymoon?" Like we hadn't spent weeks dealing with their madness. Like they hadn't tried to hijack our trip. Like she hadn't posted a public rant about how I abandoned the family. I didn't respond. I let her talk for a bit before making an excuse to hang up. A few hours later, I got a text from my dad. He claimed the stress of my betrayal had caused him high blood pressure, mentioning the doctor said it was the family tension that led to it. Then the trap was set. A group message from my brother and sister popped up, inviting me to a family dinner. The message was overly sweet, pretending like it was just to talk and catch up. Right, because the same people who had guilt-tripped and lied about me now wanted a nice dinner. I ignored it. Then my aunt called and jumped straight into a lecture about how family is family, no matter what, and how life's too short to hold grudges. She urged me to attend the dinner, saying it was important to fix things before it was too late. Then my cousin, one of the few on my side, warned me that the dinner wasn't just a casual meetup. It was an intervention. My mom wanted to force me to apologize in front of everyone, planning to record it so she could show everyone that I was making things right. So, I didn't go. That's when the news story began. Suddenly, it wasn't just about me refusing to go on the family honeymoon. No, now, my wife and I had supposedly run away and abandoned them on a trip we had allegedly planned together. My parents started telling people that my wife had isolated me from my family and that I had turned my back on them. Then my mom posted one of the most passive-aggressive messages I've ever seen in the family group chat. "Some people don't value family anymore, but that's okay. We still love them, even if they don't love us back." No names, but it was obvious who she meant. Then my wife got dragged into it again. My sister sent a direct message saying, "This all started because of you. We never had these problems before you came along." She blamed my wife for changing me, acting like I hadn't spent my whole life dealing with the family's entitlement, like I wouldn't have eventually stood up to them with or without her. I finally had enough. I sent a long message in the family group chat explaining everything. How they hijacked our honeymoon, ignored boundaries, gaslit me into thinking I was the problem, and tried to manipulate me into making things right. I called them out for booking the honeymoon behind my back and expecting me to be okay with it. I made it clear they had crossed the line, not me. Then nothing. No replies, no arguments, just silence. But I could see they had read the message. Instead of responding, they doubled down on playing the victims. My mom and sister both posted vague, dramatic statuses on Facebook about disrespectful children and when loyalty isn't returned. Some family members liked their posts, but I also noticed that some relatives who used to comment on everything weren't engaging at all anymore. Then my dad called saying, "You're breaking your mother's heart. Just say sorry so we can move on." No acknowledgement of anything they had done, no apology, just an expectation that I would take the blame. I didn't respond. They took it further by contacting my wife's parents. My in-laws called, telling us that my parents had tried to get them involved, asking them to convince me to make things right with the family. My in-laws shut them down immediately, saying we were adults and made our own decisions. That was the final straw. I updated Reddit again, venting about the latest developments, and once again, the response was overwhelming. People validated that my family was completely unhinged and that I had made the right decision. That's when my wife and I decided we were going low contact with the most toxic family members. No more responding to manipulation. No more guilt trips. No more second chances. For the first time, we were setting real boundaries, and we weren't backing down. The holidays were coming up, which meant my mom's next attempt at guilt tripping. A message popped up in the family group chat, inviting me to a family reconciliation Christmas dinner. The message was over the top, talking about how Christmas is about family, love, and forgiveness, and that there's always room at the table, no matter what had happened. I ignored it. I wasn't walking into another trap. When it was clear I wasn't going to give in, my family changed tactics. They planned another group vacation to Hawaii. This was their big move to prove they didn't need me. To make it clear, they made sure I knew I wasn't invited. My brother sent a message in the family chat, casually dropping their travel dates and hyping up the trip like it was the best thing ever. My sister posted about how sometimes you have to move forward with people who actually care about you. Then the social media posts started. Pictures at the airport, drinks at the resort, captions about how family time is the best time. It was clear they were trying to make me jealous, trying to make it seem like they were having the time of their lives without me. But cracks began to show. One of my cousins, the same one who had warned me about the intervention, sent me a message. Apparently, the trip was a disaster. They were fighting over money. My parents assumed everyone would split the costs, while my brother and sister thought mom and dad would pay for everything. Nobody wanted to cover the extra expenses, and the resort wasn't as nice as they had hoped. To top it off, they were still angry about the Maldives trip and kept bringing it up. Then my mom reached her breaking point. Another Facebook post? A long, dramatic rant about how family used to mean something, and how sometimes the people you love most will hurt you the most. Again, no names, but the meaning was clear. My dad then made his move. A single call, straight to the point. It's time to come home. Stop this nonsense. I refused. Then my sister tried a different approach. She's engaged, and now suddenly my attendance at her wedding was in question. She sent me a message, no explanation, just a simple, "If you don't apologize, you're not invited to my wedding." I responded with one word, "Okay." That wasn't the answer she was hoping for. She immediately blew up, sending me a long text about how could I do this to our family and how I was making everything worse. That's when the real reason for their anger came out. It wasn't just about control. They wanted their money back. Apparently, my parents and siblings were still upset about the money they lost when they booked their Maldives trip. They thought I should somehow make it up to them. My brother even asked me to pay them back for ruining the trip. I blocked him. But the real kicker came next. Another cousin messaged me privately saying, honestly, everyone thought that trip was a dumb idea. So even some people within the family knew my parents were being ridiculous, but no one wanted to be the first to say it. Then my mom made her final emotional play, a call with tears, dramatic pauses. I just want my son back. I kept my response simple. You never lost me. You were the ones who pushed me away. She sighed and hung up. Then came the last attempt at manipulation. My parents tried to go through my wife. My mom invited her to a spa day, supposedly to reconnect and talk things through. But we both knew it was really an attempt to pressure her into convincing me to cave. She declined. That was the final move. At that point, my wife and I both knew there was nothing to fix here. Not until my family took responsibility for their actions. And for the first time in months, we felt free. No more guilt, no more manipulation, just peace and honesty. It felt amazing. The final blow-up started the same way most of this drama did, with my mom twisting the story to anyone who would listen. She went straight to extended family, telling them I had disowned my whole family after getting married. She made sure to paint herself as the heartbroken mother who just didn't know where she went wrong. She conveniently left out the part where they hijacked my honeymoon, manipulated me, guilt-tripped me, and tried to force me to apologize for their mistakes. Then my aunt stepped in. She messaged me, saying she wanted to mediate a conversation between both sides. Her plan was a group call where we could talk things out like adults. She said my parents missed me and just wanted to clear the air. I told her straight up that I wasn't interested in any conversation unless my parents actually acknowledged what they did. No response. That was the end of that. Then my dad snapped, sending a long, furious text. "You'll regret this when we're gone." Not even an attempt to fix things, just pure emotional manipulation. I ignored it. Then came my sister's final move. She made it official. I was uninvited from her wedding. It was supposed to be a punishment, like I would suddenly beg for forgiveness because I couldn't bear missing her big day. Instead, I stayed completely indifferent. I didn't ask questions, argue, or care at all. And then karma hit. A cousin reached out to tell me that half the family was refusing to attend her wedding because of all the drama. Some didn't want to take sides, others were tired of the constant chaos, and a few simply didn't want to deal with my parents anymore. My sister's plan completely backfired. They then made one last attempt to fix everything. A family healing retreat. Yes, seriously. My parents sent out an invitation to some retreat meant to bring everyone together and let go of the negativity. A full weekend of bonding and rebuilding family trust. I laughed and declined. I knew exactly what it was. Another manipulation tactic disguised as a fresh start. Then, my mom finally snapped with one last dramatic message in the family group chat. "I hope you're happy. You've broken this family apart. We did everything for you, and this is how you repay us. You've ruined everything." That was it. No accountability, no acknowledgement of how they pushed me away, just more guilt tripping. I ignored it, and then my cousin sent me one final tidbit that was both hilarious and predictable. Apparently, my mom admitted to some relatives that maybe they had pushed too hard. She realized they had gone too far, that they were wrong, but she would never admit it to me directly. Then, something unexpected happened. Months later, my dad reached out. But this time, it wasn't an attempt to force an apology. He said, "I don't agree with you, but I miss you." That was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get from him. But my mom? She still refused to admit anything. No apology, no responsibility, just stubborn silence. That's when I knew this was the way it was going to stay. I decided to maintain my boundaries. No contact with the most toxic family members, polite but distant interactions with the rest. No drama, no arguments, just moving forward on my terms. Throughout all of this, my wife stood by me. She supported every decision I made and never pressured me to fix things with people who wouldn't change. If anything, this whole ordeal made our marriage stronger. Then, something strange happened. Some family members started drifting back. A few cousins reached out, and even my sister, who had been one of the most vocal against me, started acting normal again. No apology, but suddenly, she wasn't treating me like the villain anymore. The ultimate irony? The family never even had fun on their hijacked vacation. They don't even talk about it anymore. It was supposed to be their big family trip, but in the end, it turned into a mess of stress, money problems, and drama. Now, my wife and I are living our best lives. No more manipulation, no more guilt, just peace. And my family? They're starting to realize that they were the problem all along. Months passed, and just like that, my family changed tactics. After all the drama, guilt-tripping, fake interventions, and emotional blackmail, their next move was to act like nothing had happened. No more dramatic Facebook posts, no more guilt-laden texts, no more indirect jabs, just silence. Then, out of the blue, I received a message from my mom. "Hey, hope you're doing well. Thinking of making your favorite meal this weekend." No apology, no acknowledgement of the chaos they had caused, just a casual, "Let's act like we're a normal family again." Text. I ignored it. Then my dad tried his version of peace, a quick invitation to grab a drink. No mention of the honeymoon, the insults, or the endless attempts to manipulate me. Just a simple, let's move forward. In his mind, moving forward meant forgetting everything they had done and expecting me to act like it never happened. I ignored him too. Meanwhile, my sister, who had uninvited me to her wedding, was now dealing with her own drama. Her fiancé's family wasn't cooperating. They didn't like the wedding venue, there were arguments about the guest list, and ironically, they didn't want certain family members to attend. A cousin told me that my sister had been venting about how exhausting wedding planning was, and how some people just couldn't respect boundaries. The irony was almost too much, but karma wasn't finished yet. The same family that had turned on me was now fighting each other. Arguments over money, sibling rivalries resurfacing. My parents, who had always acted like they were keeping the family together, were now dealing with relatives who weren't speaking to each other over petty travel expenses. Then, the biggest shock of all. One of my cousins, who had originally sided with them, sent me a full-blown apology. They admitted they felt pressured to take my parents' side, even though they didn't agree with what was happening. They had gone along with it because they didn't want to become the next target. Then they dropped the real reason for the family's sudden silence. It wasn't because they had moved on or regretted their behavior, but because my mom was embarrassed. She had pushed so hard with her manipulation tactics, dragged my name through the mud, rallied the family against me, and tried every trick to guilt me into submission. But it didn't work. She had no idea how to fix it without admitting she was wrong, so instead, she chose silence. The once active family group chat was now dead. No passive-aggressive messages, no forced family bonding attempts, just occasional memes or holiday greetings. It felt weird at first, but honestly, it was peaceful. Meanwhile, my wife and I were already planning our anniversary trip, just the two of us. No group chats, no surprise family bookings, no guilt. Then, the soft reaching out started. My brother and sister began liking my social media posts. No comments, no messages, just quiet engagement, like they were testing the waters. Then my mom made another move. A dinner invite with the promise of not discussing the past unless I wanted to. Another attempt to control the narrative. If I brought it up, I would be the one dragging out the drama. If I didn't, it meant we were just moving on like nothing had happened. I ignored that too. Then, out of nowhere, my sister's wedding invite resurfaced. After making a huge deal about how I wasn't welcome unless I apologized, she suddenly changed her tune. If you want, I guess you can come to my wedding. No apology, no acknowledgement of everything she said, just a casual I guess. I declined. That's when my mom tried one last time with a dramatic text. I just want my family together again before it's too late. Still no ownership of her actions, still no accountability, just another attempt to guilt me into fixing what she had broken. I didn't respond. For the first time in years, I finally felt free. I didn't need their approval, didn't need to prove anything, didn't need to keep the peace with people who had spent so much time tearing me down. My wife and I were happy, and that was all that mattered. A year passed, and life had never been more peaceful. My wife and I went on our anniversary trip, this time with no drama, no unexpected family bookings, and no passive-aggressive messages. Just us. Exactly how a trip should be. We spent our time exploring, relaxing, and actually enjoying the vacation without feeling like we had to look over our shoulders. Meanwhile, my family was still a mess. My sister's wedding, after all the ultimatums and threats, was a disaster. A cousin filled me in. Half the guests had backed out. The in-laws weren't cooperating. My parents tried to control parts of the wedding, and there were multiple arguments leading up to the big day. I asked why they kept sharing all of this with me. Honestly, they admitted, I don't agree with how they treated you, but I just can't say that out loud. Even on the wedding day itself, there was tension between my sister and my parents. It wasn't the perfect wedding she had imagined, and considering how she had treated me, banning me as a power move, karma was a little too perfect. But that didn't stop my mom from playing the victim. Her Facebook statuses hadn't stopped. She was still posting cryptic messages about family, about who forgets where they came from, and about people choosing pride over love. Again, no names, but everyone knew who she was talking about. At this point, it was just embarrassing. And apparently, I wasn't the only one who thought so. My cousin revealed that the family was still divided. The honeymoon drama had caused permanent damage. Some relatives had distanced themselves completely, sick of the drama, tired of the guilt trips, and just wanting to avoid the toxicity. Then, my dad tried one last man-to-man talk. He reached out casually to ask if I wanted to grab a beer. No apology, no acknowledgement of everything that had happened, just a let's move on attitude like nothing had ever happened. I declined. Then there was my brother, still bitter, still refusing to speak to me. According to another cousin, he still blamed me for ruining the family trip a year later. Then came the most predictable update yet. My sister's marriage was already in trouble. Barely a few months in, and cracks were already showing. A cousin mentioned that she and her husband had been arguing constantly over financial issues, in-law drama, and control problems. Funny how she spent so much time claiming that my wife was the problem in my life, yet here she was, dealing with her own mess. Meanwhile, the family group chat had become a ghost town. What used to be constant messages, forced bonding, and guilt tripping was now silent. Just an occasional shared meme or a rare holiday greeting. And the ultimate irony, my mom, who had spent years pushing family vacations, was now complaining that no one wanted to do them anymore. Turns out, the family had gotten so sick of how the big vacation went down that no one wanted to plan another one. The same people who once attacked me for ruining their vacation were now refusing to travel together. Meanwhile, my wife and I were stronger than ever. Cutting out the toxicity had made our marriage better, not worse. No stress, no manipulation, just us. Living our lives the way we wanted. Then, one night, my dad softened up. He quietly called. No anger this time, no guilt tripping. Just a simple, I understand why you did what you did. I don't know how to fix things. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest I had ever gotten from him. But my mom still refused to admit any fault. She still acted like I was the one who had abandoned them. Some family members started testing the waters, inviting me to small gatherings, casually reaching out, not pushing anything, just trying to gauge where I stood. I decided I was open to limited contact, but only on my terms. No guilt tripping, no manipulation, no forced apologies. I made one thing clear. If they wanted me in their lives, they had to respect my boundaries. And if they couldn't, I was fine walking away for good. A year of silence passed, and then, out of nowhere, my mom sent a long text. She missed me, wanted to start fresh. She didn't say what she was apologizing for, just that she hated how things had turned out and wished we could go back to how things used to be. It seemed convenient. A few days later, I found out why. A cousin casually mentioned that my family was planning another big vacation. A massive family reunion-style trip with flights, resort bookings, the whole works. Suddenly, my mom's timing made sense. She wanted me back in the fold, but not because she missed me. She wanted me there to help pay for this next trip. Then she accidentally confirmed it with a follow-up text. It would be nice to have a big family trip again someday, like old times. There it was. I called her out and responded with, I'll consider reconnecting if we actually talk about what happened. No reply. She wanted a reunion, but only if I played along, only if I pretended none of this had ever happened. Then another cousin spilled more family drama. Apparently, my mom was struggling to hold the family together. So many relatives had distanced themselves after the honeymoon disaster. The constant drama, manipulation, and guilt tripping had pushed people away. The family wasn't as close as it used to be, and some relatives had straight up avoided any gatherings my parents hosted. Then, my brother, who hadn't spoken to me in over a year, broke his silence. No apology, no acknowledgement of the feud, just a casual message like we had spoken yesterday. Then my sister made her move. A guilt trip message. Mom cries about you all the time. Just let it go. I ignored it. Even after all this time, they still refused to accept reality. Then I got another update from my cousin. Apparently, my name still came up in family arguments a full year later. They were still talking about me. Then came the last-ditch effort, a final message from my dad. You'll regret losing your family one day. I calmly responded, I didn't lose my family. They lost me. That was the last thing I ever sent. Then I updated Reddit. The response was overwhelming support. People applauded the boundaries I set, called out my family's toxic behavior, and encouraged me to keep going. Then, the ultimate karma moment. The big family vacation they had planned fell apart. Half the relatives bailed. Some refused to deal with my parents. Others were just tired of the drama. The same people who once forced me into family vacations couldn't even get the family to show up anymore. And my mom, the one who had always pushed family unity above all else, was now struggling to hold the family together. Meanwhile, my wife and I had moved on completely. We started our own traditions, our own vacations, our own family. No drama, no guilt tripping, no toxicity, just peace. Then, one final attempt at manipulation, a last message from my mom. I guess you don't care about family anymore. I left her on red because real family isn't about control. It isn't about guilt. It isn't about forcing people to comply. It's about respect. And if they couldn't give me that, then I was better off without them.